Today on the Big 6 in 60, the Hawks get a big win in Madison Square Garden.
A come-from-behind win for the Hawks on the road in the playoffs.
The Timberwolves tie their series with the Nuggets.
This has to be considered the best rivalry in the NBA right now because these playoff games, they are absolute cinema.
And Trent Williams signs a deal to stay with the 49ers.
It's a 2-year deal and an extension.
This is the Big 6 in 60, the 6 biggest national sports stories from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now. Thank you for making the Big 6 in 60 your first listen of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. The Hawks stunned the Knicks 107-106 at MSG in Game 2 to even their series at 1-1. Brad Rowland with Locked On Hawks has more after the win.
A come-from-behind win for the Hawks on the road in the playoffs, 107-106 over the Knicks in Game 2, and in the process, the Hawks steal home court in the series. They make a lot of people that were writing the team off mid-game feel probably a little bit silly right now. And no, it does not guarantee anything moving forward. But the Hawks won a road game against a quality opponent. They did so in come-from-behind fashion, and it was a lot of fun to consume, a lot to get into, but a great win. That's the top-line thought for me on this podcast. Nothing, scientific about that, but just a resilient win for the Hawks. They never gave up. They're down by as many as 14. They're down by 9 with 7 minutes to go. And then they basically turned the water off on the Knicks defensively. And I want to begin right there because through a lot of the game, I would have told you the Hawks were not playing all that well defensively. They weren't ever totally disastrous on defense, but some of the numbers along the way were not the prettiest for the Hawks defense. And then you see as kind of the game goes along, and it happens on film as well. It wasn't just the numbers, but the fourth quarter, they allow 15 points the entire fourth quarter, turning the water off. And in the second half, the Hawks had a 100 defensive rating. That means they allowed exactly 1 point per 100 possessions per possession in the second half, which is absolutely excellent. And that included a 68 defensive rating in the fourth quarter, which not coincidentally was their best defensive rebounding quarter of the game as well. So in the end, the Hawks had a 114-ish defensive rating in this game. That's not special, but for me, it was the calling card because of the way the game ended. The Hawks had to score 2. Their offense got better as the game went along. It wasn't Game 1, I thought, was pretty clearly a result of the Hawks not playing well enough on offense. They just couldn't score enough to hang in and win Game 1. Today, it was a two-way effort for sure. It was not one side of the floor was decisively better than the other for Atlanta, but I was impressed by the way the Hawks defended, in particular in that fourth quarter. They held the Knicks 45% shooting from the field in the game, 32% from three, which is, that's a little bit of help from the opponent, but still the Hawks did a good job across the board there. They got called for a lot of fouls, 26 of them in the game, but only, I use the term only kind of loosely, 27 free throw attempts. That's fewer than they allowed in Game 1. And look, along the way to steal a win on the road when you don't even play that well, that's actually kind of funny. The Hawks, I don't think, played anywhere near their best game, which you could probably find encouragement in, honestly, that the Hawks were able to win a road game against the Knicks without playing all that well on their own. I say that now because the Knicks missed 10 free throws in this one, which were including 2 huge ones from OG Anunoby down the stretch. The one area where I have to just say, coming into the series, there's a reason I flagged this particular spot as a problem area for the Hawks. It wasn't just me. It was basically every person that follows this stuff closely was pointing to the fact that, yes, the Hawks actually, I pointed this anyway. Everybody else probably didn't, but the Hawks were actually very, very good on the defensive glass for the last 3 months of the season. And that basically aligned for the most part with actually having 2 healthy centers for the most part. And the Hawks haven't had that actually in this playoff series with Jock Landale available, but they had been really good defensively on the glass for a while. But they are still small in the front court. And more importantly in this matchup, Mitchell Robinson is the single best offensive rebounder in the entire NBA. And Josh Hart is one of the best non-big guys in that category as well. So they have 2 real threats, plus Karl-Anthony Towns. They're a threat in that particular area. And the Hawks had a 57% defensive rebound rate in this game. That is very, very bad. The Knicks had 14 offensive rebounds that led to 24 second chance points. So when they got them, they converted on them. And for a large portion of the game, I would have talked about this a lot as the reason why the Hawks lost, at least one of the reasons why the Hawks lost. But they had one good quarter along the way in that particular area. It was the fourth, which allowed them to close possessions and win the game. And, some of their fringier lineups that played real minutes in this game, for example, Tony Bradley, who the Hawks, I know, is not always the prettiest guy to watch. Tony Bradley was brought in explicitly for this matchup to deal with Mitchell Robinson. And in Tony Bradley's 12 minutes on the court, the Hawks were +7, and they had a 75% defensive rebound rate. So yes, he took one objectively hilariously bad shot in this game. But Tony Bradley, beyond that, did a very good job. That's just one example of a guy who did a little things to win the game. So yes, a black mark on the defensive glass for the most part, but as you can see in the results in the fourth quarter, when they close possessions, they have a pretty good opportunity to get stops. And look, their first shot half-court defense was basically like, how do you defend when things slow down? Was actually excellent in this game, and it was the entire way. For instance, Jalen Brunson had 29 points, yes, but he needed 29 shooting possessions to get those points. I love Jamal Crawford, former Hawk, covered Jamal back in the day when I was first starting to cover the Hawks. He was going a little bit effusive with Jalen Brunson, who's a really good player, to be very fair. Jalen Brunson's a all-star, all-NBA kind of guy. I'm not picking at Jalen Brunson, who's a star. But I thought he was like very ordinary in this game. And, there was a kind of a love fest. 29 points on 29 shooting possessions is not a special game. It just wasn't. And the combination of Dyson and Nikhil, they've held him under wraps in both games, other than the first quarter of game one, where if you look at that film back, it was mostly against switches against like McCollum and Okongwu. So anyway, I say that now just to say, defensively, the Hawks were not perfect. First half defense below where they want to be, but shout out to Jonathan Kuminga, who did a really good job on Karl-Anthony Towns in the fourth quarter in particular. I thought Nikhil, while he was not good offensively by his standards, was really active and really plugged in defensively. Jalen Johnson had a rough game overall, but he got better defensively as the fourth quarter went along and made a huge contest on the final play. And, Dyson's always great defensively, et cetera, et cetera. Even Okongwu was battling amid this knee issue that he's been apparently facing in recent days. So I'll stop for now, but defensively, they kind of turned the water off at the end of the game. That was a huge part in the win. On offense, it wasn't special. They had a 116 offensive rating. That's actually very solid. They were very good inside the arc. So one of the areas where the Hawks struggled mightily in game one was their 2-point shooting. Today, there was 61% on twos. That includes 23 out of 28 at the rim, according to our friends at Cleaning the Glass. And they're 12 of 15 on twos in the fourth quarter. So when the chips were down, they got to the rim. They made shots. Jalen had a rough game, but he had a big drive and finish late in the game. McCollum was heroic down the stretch and really, for a large portion of this game. And the Hawks didn't shoot well from three. 9 of 30 from three. And often, not always, but oftentimes a recipe for a road upset against a good team is like, hey, make some shots. And the Hawks didn't shoot like all-time terrible, but in the second half, they were 1 of 12. And they managed to win the second half and win the game even with that. Always 22 assists for the Hawks. That's actually well below their average. They led the league in assists this year. So it wasn't like the beautiful game kind of stuff. It was a little bit more ISO-y, a little bit more one-on-one basketball than I think Quinn would prefer. But that's the playoffs in some respects. And also, importantly, they only had 12 turnovers. That's a huge, huge thing. Because the Hawks did not do a great job on the overall possession battle, which I'm always going to focus on. But most of that, if not all of it, was the rebounding disadvantage. The Hawks actually won the turnover battle in this game, and only giving the ball away 12 times is actually very, very strong for the Hawks. And they ran. It's been a key this whole season. When the Hawks can run, they are effective on offense. And they had 25 pass rate points in this game. That isn't all of transition. That's a little bit different calculator than just fast break, quote unquote, points. But their half-court offense does need to get some work done, but it improved a lot in the second half, and they were able to run and get easy stuff in transition, and that ended up being huge. And look, McCollum was awesome. I know I didn't quite cover it because there was a little bit of a lag. He was talking when I was doing the podcast on Sunday night, and McCollum made some national headlines with his comment about Jalen Brunson. I thought it was relatively harmless, but it's the playoffs and it's New York, which is a big media market and all that stuff. McCollum's a veteran guy. But he got into it tonight with Jose Alvarado during the game. And I would say between that and the Brunson comments, he is now in the Trae Young slot of public enemy number one in New York. And hey, you go ahead and do that, you win the game. And yes, he missed free throws at the end of the game that could have cost them, but it didn't cost them. And he'll become, I'm sure it'll be a 3-day story in New York about McCollum winning this game. And look, he had 32 points. He was absolutely huge in this one. It wasn't perfect, but certainly was very, very good to raise the floor of the offense. And between him and Kuminga, 51 points. Kuminga was a huge force, especially late in this one, to kind of make up for at least some of the shortcomings of guys like Jalen and Nikhil on offense. So yeah, a team win. It wasn't like the way you would draw it up. I think if you asked me coming into game 2 and said, hey, the Hawks are going to win this game, I would have predicted a bigger bounce back from guys like Jalen and Nikhil, and especially Jalen, in order to win that game. That didn't really happen, although Nikhil was good defensively. It's just that McCollum was really, really good. Kuminga was really good, and the bench was generally better. And while being able to control the New York bench, little things here and there. It's never one thing. I'm a big fan of nuance and context, and I always find it kind of silly that people try to kind of distill this stuff down into one thing or maybe even two things. It's never one or two things. But hey, while we're here, if the Hawks lost this game, there would have been a national referendum on Jalen Johnson in a way that would have seemed silly to me. Like I made a quip during the game about how I thought it was like silly that Jalen's entire like all NBA level season was being dismissed out of hand because he wasn't good in 2 games in the playoffs, which was happening. But when you win, that conversation disappears. So in the end, it's a results-based business. I do try to provide context and give you the whole picture when I can, but the feeling after a win is a feeling after a win, and it's much different than the feeling after a loss. So we'll get into more details in a second when it comes to how this game unfolded, including the full crunch time breakdown and player evaluations. But on the whole, an awesome, awesome night for the Hawks, a road win. And look, the Hawks were, in my opinion, always alive in this series, always a live underdog, always a chance to win this series. But when you win one of the first 2 on the road, you now have a clear advantage. Not necessarily to be the favorite in the series, but you have an advantage in that you have more games at home than your opponent does the rest of the season, the rest of the series. If you win at home, if the Hawks win every home game in this series, they will win the series. Now, that's not a guarantee by any means, but they steal one here, and a lot of good vibes as they head back to Atlanta in advance of Game 3.
The NBA playoffs are here, where every possession matters, every matchup is magnified, and every game can swing a series. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a great way to get in on the action. You can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. The app makes it easy to follow the action with player stats, trends, and matchups all in one place. And during the playoffs, the extra insight really matters when you're looking at stars, role players, and key moments. It just makes the entire playoff experience more engaging from start to finish. As we round out the regular season, the Celtics play the Knicks in Madison Square Garden tonight. Line is at -5 on FanDuel. If you want to go the other way, Boston money line is 176, plus 176 on that line. Head over to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. Welcome back to the Big 6 in 60. The Timberwolves came back from 19 down to beat the Nuggets 119 to 114, and even that series at 1 apiece. Jack Bormans with Luke Inman on Locked On Wolves with their recap.
This has to be considered the best rivalry in the NBA right now, because these playoff games, they are absolute cinema at this point. I don't care which team you're rooting for. It's just absolute pure anarchy for 48 minutes. And it was again tonight, per usual, despite being down 19 points, starting the game about as bad as you possibly can, especially on the road. The Wolves mounted the comeback. They held on in the final few seconds. They tied this thing back up at 1 apiece. We've all seen the stats, being down 2-0 versus tied up at 1s here, Jack. What jumped out the most big picture-wise as we zoom out a little bit? And seriously, how massive was this win? What's it do for this team now heading back to the Target Center Thursday?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, most importantly, is that it just tells the rest of the team that Anthony Edwards is healthy enough to get things done. And that was something that was a serious concern after game 1. It was a serious concern after he bonked knees with Jokic early, had that weird kind of slide step in the first 3 minutes of the game, looked really hampered and just played himself into it. So I think that's probably the biggest takeaway. But it was just one of the best playoff games I think I've watched in a long time. But it just felt like the more deserving team won this game. And I think that the Timberwolves' defensive effort was unbelievable throughout kind of the final 3 quarters, just taking away that first quarter, which was just abhorrent. We'll get into that. But Nikola Jokic was absolutely gassed by the end of this game from dealing with the combination of Julius Randle's physicality and Rudy Gobert's discipline on the defensive end, while just being absolutely just mercilessly hunted on the other end of the floor. I thought that Randall was terrific in stretches on Jokic, just making him uncomfortable. Had 9 defensive rebounds as well, which was huge. But just sticking with the defense on the Stars in the fourth quarter of this game was absolutely unbelievable. Both just looked absolutely exhausted by the end of the game. Jokic had 2 points on 1 of 7 shooting, which is 1 assist in the fourth quarter, which is a stat line you almost never see from him in a game that matters. And just for context, this is from Justin Russo on Twitter, does a great job covering the Clippers. With Rudy on the floor tonight, Jokic was 1 of 8 for 4 points. With Rudy off the floor, he was 7 of 12 for 20 points. And I think that, a lot of Wolves fans will, default to, the offense is so much better without Rudy. That must mean the team is so much better without Rudy. And in some cases that can be true. But I just think his defensive discipline and what he's able to do and get inside Jokic's head just by having to make him work really hard and make him think and do all those things, I just think is so invaluable for the Wolves. And then, Jamal Murray too, 2 points on 1 of 4 shooting with 2 assists and just 1 turnover in that fourth quarter as well. So to hold those guys to 4 points on 2 of 11 shooting, and not counting the heave at the end for Murray with just 3 assists and a turnover is pretty darn good. I also just think the collective fight and willpower of the group when things look really rough is just incredible, and something that I think that you got to tip your cap to, because I think a lot of Wolves fans, myself included, thought that the first 8-10 minutes of this game that they were just going to go out sad because they just showed no fight on the defensive end. I mean, giving up 3 4-point plays in 9 minutes. They fouled 5 3-point shooters in this game. That's so rare to do that and still win a game. It became a situation where like maybe Chris Finch should have been focused on things like that instead of the officiating after game 1 and before game 2. But yeah, I just think that between that and then, the free throw shooting just being horrible from the Timberwolves tonight is just really hard to have in a big spot, right? I think, that type of thing, free throw shooting for the Wolves tonight in this game, they were 19
of 30. Yeah.
The Nuggets weren't a whole lot better at 23 of 30, but missing 11 free throws is the type of thing that can wipe out. Aaron Gordon being a complete non-factor, being plus 17 in second chance points, plus 12 in the paint, plus 10 off the bench. It's just those types of things that can just get washed away if you don't take care of your business. And so that's something that, I think the Timberwolves, for their money, have to be way, way, way better at for the rest of the series. But they've shown us all season that may not be coming.
I don't want to veer off too far. We got a lot to cover here in a 22 minute show, but what did you see in those first, first quarter? Nuggets put up 39, but then the rest of the game, something switched there, Jack. And it really felt like the Wolves were very stagnant, shooting the 3 ball, weren't getting to the paint. Nuggets were getting all the free throws, getting to the stripe, and then something switched. Is it that simple, or what did you see from your lens that kind of got the Wolves back in the game, put up 39 of their own in the second quarter, and then stuck with it, though, in the second half as well?
Yeah, it's just 3 words: swing the rock. Swing the rock to the other end of the floor.
I'm going to get that tattooed if we win this series, Jack. Swing the rock.
I mean, the Timberwolves did a much better job just moving the ball from side to side. I think that you can create so much spacing in today's NBA if you just make a defense move out of it, especially against a team like the Nuggets that's playing as heavily in the gaps as they are in Anthony Edwards. If you're able to draw 2, kick it and swing it and get the defense in rotation, you're going to open up driving lanes. You're going to be able to use Rudy Gobert a lot more because the backside of the defense is going to be completely compromised in rotation. And you're going to create open 3-point shots, open driving lanes, be able to get to the rim, move around the lack of rim protection that the Nuggets already have. So I think it was all of that, but it was just driven by better ball movement. And the other part of it too for me was that the Wolves just did things a lot more decisively. They played faster in the half court. They drove to the rim faster. They cut faster. They moved. They decided to pass the ball faster. The passes had more zip on them. I think it's all those types of things. And then I think the Timberwolves did a really excellent job the final 3 quarters of sticking to the game plan in terms of who they wanted to have shooting the ball. Trying to fight over screens on Murray and doing a better job switching and then kicking guys out. I thought their ability to stay with just Rudy on Jokic allowed Minnesota to do a better job of staying home on shooters like Cam Johnson. And I thought that, the Timberwolves kind of said, hey, look, if Christian Brown's going to be the guy that's going to go off and score, 16 points in this game, then so be it. But I'd certainly like to see the defense on a guy like Tim Hardaway, who's been a Wolves killer all year, be a little bit better. But I just think overall the defensive intensity really took a step up.
Yeah, well said there. Let's hand out some flowers, a little bit of love with our player of the game.
This is the Locked On Player of the Game.
All right, man. I'm sure Vegas has you rolling with Ant at, minus 280, minus 300 right now, which is fair. But there was a lot of great play by multiple Wolves. I'm sure we'll get into later with the X factor. But lay it on us, game MVP, who was it and why?
Yeah, it takes everything in my power not to give it to Rudy Gobert just because of what he did in that fourth quarter. I think if there was ever a game where one quarter could earn you player of the game, it would be Rudy Gobert in the fourth quarter. But I'm going to go with Anthony Edwards. I just think what he did in this game, while very clearly severely limited, especially on the defensive end of the floor, was something that stood out to me in a major way. And I think that there's a case to be made that you could have Julius Randle guard Christian Brown and Anthony Edwards guard Aaron Gordon for the sole fact that Anthony Edwards' rim protection and his rotations on the backside, helping to protect the rim, have been excellent in this series, as is his defense getting back in transition. And I just think the way that he wants to sell out to make plays on the defensive end of the floor and then get in there and rebound, right? I mean, you look at who the Timberwolves' leading rebounder was tonight. It was Anthony Edwards with 10, and 9 of those came on the defensive end of the floor. I think one of my favorite things about playoff Ant is just the way that his intentionality about crashing the glass and helping as a huge bodied, 6'5", 200, whatever it is, 25 pound, just sheer muscle frame, get in there with, super high vertical ball skills, all that type of stuff, get in there and mix it up is huge. And especially in a night where the Wolves didn't have Rudy Gobert for his normal minutes, to see Ant get 10 rebounds, Julius get 9 rebounds, all of them defensive, and then Nas also have 9 rebounds, despite being hampered, were huge. But I think for Ant, you just think about the way that he took the 2 lumps early on the knee and just kind of figured out, all right, I'm not going to be as aggressive with the ball in my hands. I need to kind of figure out mentally, what do I need to do to impact this game? And Ant, I think did a great job of kind of slow playing it and figuring out how to draw 2, get off the ball, trust his teammates to make plays behind it, and then, move without the basketball to make sure that you can get it back in a position where you can attack. And I thought that he did a much better job of that in this game than he did in game 1. I know Ant, it took him 25 shots to get 30 points, but I still thought that, for the most part, he didn't settle. He didn't settle as much as he did in game 1 for my money. And I thought he did a much better job of just attacking the rim, because even if you attack the rim, you miss some shots, it's going to open up second chance opportunities because the Nuggets are going to send 2 or 3 guys at you. So for Ant to finish with a double-double of 30 points, 10 rebounds, and still be an overwhelmingly positive impact on the game for my money, despite, not making a 3 in the second half, despite, only having 2 assists. I thought the way that he just kind of layered in, making smart plays at smart times, rebounding, getting block shots, things like that was all part of why Ant was so important tonight.
The Hurricanes and Senators played to double overtime before Carolina finally pulled away with the win after some controversy. Locked On Hurricanes explains.
We're going to talk about what a chaotic game 2 was that happened at Lenovo Center on Monday night, with the fact that the Hurricanes had a lead, saw it go 2-2, a lot of missed calls on both sides. And the fact, too, you're talking about a game that had a goal in overtime, gets overtime by the most objective offside rule known to man, and then thankfully Jordan Martinook ends this thing in double overtime. Also hear from Jordan Stahl, get his thoughts on the game overall, and then I'll give you my thoughts on the first 2 games as a whole. As like I said, the Hurricanes take a 2-0 series lead back to Ottawa for game 3 on Thursday night. But talking about the game as a whole, my absolute goodness, this game had everything in a thriller that should have ended a lot sooner. I mean, like I said, the Hurricanes Went 3-2, double overtime. Jordan Martinook, what a way to score your first game of the playoffs. And the fact that it was a sequence back in overtime where he draws the penalty on a hook while on a breakaway. On the delayed call, Mark Jankowski scores. You think, all right, it's game. We move on. First overtime, no big deal. And then, of course, it turns out that the guys back in Toronto looked at the most minuscule, fragment frame. I don't know what you want to call this, but saying that Jordan Stahl did not have control of the puck for a possession, or however they want to phrase this thing. And when you look at the still picture, the puck was on his stick when it enters the zone, and then it gets loose afterwards. But they're saying that he didn't have control of the possession, even though it's literally the same thing. But sure, whatever. We're going to make we're going to make an onside rule be very subjective now on what may or may not look like a control, even though the puck was on his stick. Thank you, Matt Duchesne, for giving us an onside rule that makes absolutely no sense. And the fact that I think everyone and their mother saw this as a onside, but apparently Toronto didn't think so. So they give Jordan Martinook a penalty shot because initially it was a delay. So didn't score, unfortunately, because of Linus Ullmark, basically staying on his head for most of the game. But thankfully, Jordan Martinook gets the redemption of winning this thing in double overtime. Thankfully, the Hurricanes didn't leave game 2 with a loss, because that really would have been, a kick in the pants on. You thought you won the game, and then you lose it later on because of a subjective tic-tac-y, wherever you want to look, how you want to look at that type of frame. Luckily, it worked out. And I will say this, gotta give both goalies their props. I mean, Freddie Anderson, you talk about a guy who gave up, 2 goals on 39 shots, 37-39 saved, 120 goals against average in the game, a 949 save percentage. So yeah, and then Linus Ullmark. He gave up the fact that he gave up 3 goals on 46 shots. He was 43 for 46. You got to give him a lot of props on that. And then obviously that second line of Stanko and Hall and Blake. My goodness, those guys are on absolute fire. You're talking 9 points through the first 2 games. They had 9 points in the first 4 periods of this series. Jackson Blake with 3 assists. Taylor Hall with a goal and 2 assists, and of course Logan Stankoven 2 goals and an assist. But man, those guys are on absolute fire. They're honestly right now one of the hottest lines for both teams in this series, and the fact that they've contributed to 3 goals already for the Carolina Hurricanes, and then combined 9 points through the first 2 games. And welcome to the score sheet, Sebastian Aho. Great pass by Jordan Stahl after selling the shot. Great pass for the tip in. And then, like I said, Jordan Martinook gets his first of the series, first of the playoffs, and then great passing from K'Andre Miller and especially Nikolai Ehlers. The fact that he was able to keep the play, find Marty all alone in the slot. Just have basically everyone look at Nikolai Ehlers, because that's how lethal of a shot he is. With the fact that he found Jordan Martinook in a pocket where they just left him all alone, and then Bob's your uncle. Hurricane score. This thing ends in double overtime. Like I said, it's crazy when you look at the numbers when it's, the Hurricanes had 1 power play the entire game and they had 3 penalties, which, there was missed calls on both sides of the ice, even back in game 1, where there was a lot of you could call boardings, trips, high sticks on both sides. And it's just, you could tell these refs really wanted this game to go 5-on-5 a lot more. And of course they, were calling some interferences and stuff like that. So this was definitely one of those things where there could have been a lot more penalties, but in the end, the Hurricanes are like, hey, they don't ask how, they ask how many. They went 1 for 1. Breakachuk takes a really dumb penalty in the first period, throwing an extra jab in the back of Aho's head, and the Hurricanes made him pay for it. So there you go. And then, like I said, 52 hits from the Senators, 43 from the Hurricanes. You knew this was going to happen just because of the fact that what happened in game one, where the Hurricanes had 57 hits total, 21 in the first period. You knew Ottawa was going to come out, swinging and really trying to even this series up. And then block shots. How about the Hurricanes sacrifice in the body? 28 block shots compared to Ottawa's 25. But all in all, the Hurricanes got the win. Very much different aspect of this series compared to game one, where the Hurricanes kind of smothered the Senators, shut them out. And you thought that was going to be the same thing for the most part because, the Hurricanes had another 2-0 lead. And, just unfortunately, that second period does them in like it did, during the regular season, where it's just, kind of a more relaxed defense. And we always talk about if you breathe and take your foot off the gas, the other team will make you pay. And the Ottawa Senators are a team that, they'll make you pay in the fact that, you got Jake Batherson got his first of the year. Dylan Cousins got his first of the year on a very, very soft goal. I mean, Freed played well, giving him only 2 goals, but that second goal, you'd really want that one back, a very, a goal that should never really happen. Even through the 5-hole, it was, sure, Tracy said it was soft. A lot of people said it was soft. It was a very, very soft goal. So that's definitely one that you would love to get back. But other than that, Freddie played very well, made a lot of big saves when you needed it most. And, in the end, you saw the Hurricanes have, a 2-goal lead. Second period kind of bites them in the butt a little bit with, just being a little bit too relaxed or, not being tight as they usually are. They definitely need to do that for game 3 because Ottawa's definitely going to be in a desperation mode because the last thing they want is to be down 3-0, with the Hurricanes having a stranglehold on this series. But in the end, I mean, hey, the Hurricanes got the win. Big heroics from, like I said, Jordan Martinook. If you need to get your first of the playoffs, that's one way to do it. And the celebration was absolutely electric. And even you see like the video and the photos, like Martinook really knows how to give you some goal celebrations, especially big moments like that. Just the energy, the reactions. It's just, if there was anyone who deserved a moment like that, it was definitely Jordan Martinook after how, the first overtime went where, had the chance on the penalty shootout, but, Allmark made the saves. And then in the end, in double overtime gets the winner. And now the Hurricanes have a 2-0 series lead. And, a lot of guys are clicking right now. And, some other guys are on the score sheet. And, all that really mattered. They don't ask Cal. They ask how many. Hurricanes got 3 goals. So all that matters. Now they got, 2 down, 2 to go in the first round. And now we take this thing back to Ottawa and see what happens there.
Welcome back to the Big 6 in 60. The Cavs took a 2-0 series lead on Toronto with a win in Game 2. Danny Cunningham with Locked On Cavs was live from the court post-game with more.
The Cavs getting a 115-105 win over the Toronto Raptors in game number 2 here at Rocket Arena. If you're watching the video, you can see the court in the background. If you're listening, I should sound better than I did because they're not breaking down the court the way they were after game 1, but there might be some background noise. So please excuse that. Just the cost of doing business for a post-game show inside the arena afterwards. But the story of this game on Monday night is the Cavs didn't play their best. They didn't have a great performance from a role player the way they did from Max Strus on Saturday afternoon in game 1. But the Cavs' best players are just better than Toronto's best players. And that's ultimately what a lot of these series can come down to. Donovan Mitchell was incredible in this game. James Harden was awesome in this game. Evan Mobley was fantastic in this game. You can make a case, and you can look at this 115-105 win. You can look at the box score, and you can make the case. And I think this is actually, I don't even think that it's making the case. I think this is the way it was. The Cavs had the 3 best players in this game. Donovan Mitchell was the best player, and then we could have a discussion who was better between Evan Mobley and James Harden because they were both fantastic in this game. And then you get into RJ Barrett. Scotty Barnes had an okay night. Like, I think the box score for him is a little bit better than the performance was, and he was better down the stretch, the same way he was in a game that was decided in game number 1. So I do think some of his statistics were a little bit empty. I think he played better in this game than he did in game 1, certainly. But, like, the Cavs had the 3 best players on the floor. And then after that, like, the Cavs role players didn't play great. Sam Merrill had a rough day. Max Strus hit a couple of big shots, but had 6 points, which is a far cry from the 24 that he had in game one. Jared Allen, I thought, was good, only played 25 minutes. Now, Dean Wade is the exception here. Like, yes, he only scored 3 points, but he was fantastic defensively. And we will get to the type of defense that he played on Brandon Ingram coming up in just a little bit. But for the Cavs, like, this was a game that going into it, they expected it to be a much more challenging task than game number one was. Because a game number one of the series is so often a feel-out game, right? You're trying to just figure out what your opponent is doing. You're trying to see how they're attacking you, trying to see how you can counter what they want to do, trying to think of what counters they might come up with to try and slow down the things that you're having success with. And we saw the Cavs, obviously, particularly on the offensive end of the floor, against the Raptors in game number one, have a lot of success. And I still think they had a lot of success. They just didn't, quite frankly, hit as many shots in this game. They still shot 53%, which is right around where they shot at 55% in game number one. On Saturday afternoon, they only shot 32% from beyond the arc compared to the 50% from beyond the arc that they shot in game number one. So, like, that's a big part of the reason why offensively their statistics weren't as gaudy in this game. But the Raptors tried a lot of different things. And that's why Kenny Atkinson, prior to this game, said this is going to be the toughest game. When you face a team that sort of now has a better understanding, which I do think the Raptors did. I think the Raptors understood the assignment better in this game than they did game number one. They knew what they had to do. They knew what they had to stop. And truthfully, like, they might win a game in the series. I picked Cavs in 5 before the series, and I feel pretty good about that after 2 games. And I would not be stunned if the Raptors win game 3 in Toronto, but I do think at bare minimum, the Cavs are going to split those 2 games. But the Raptors knew that they needed to find a way to slow down or stop Donovan Mitchell, slow down or stop James Harden, slow down or stop Evan Mobley. Toronto, quite frankly, just doesn't have answers for those guys. And that is not something that is like that the Raptors should be ashamed of, because you look at their personnel and who on that team, and we talked about this after game number one, who on that team do you want defending Donovan Mitchell? They don't have an answer there. And to be fair to the Raptors, there are not very many teams that do have an answer to that question. There are some. Oklahoma City certainly comes to mind. But the Toronto Raptors, we can say for certainty, after these first 2 games where Donovan went for 32 points in game number one and 30 points in game number 2 on 13 of 23 shooting here on Monday evening, we can say for certainty that the Raptors don't have anyone to stop Donovan Mitchell. It is for them. They tried a lot of different things, right? They started to trap a little bit. They're trying to rotate who's defending Donovan. We saw Scotty Barnes defend him a little bit in both games. Didn't have very much success. We've seen Jamal Shed. We've seen RJ Barrett. We've seen Jacoby Walter. They just, quite frankly, don't have the personnel to slow down the Cavs' offensive attack. Because outside of those 3 guys, where Donovan had 30, James Harden, like I said, was fantastic. He had 28 in this game on 9 of 14 shooting. Evan Mobley had 25 on 11 of 13 shooting. Outside of those guys, the only one to score more than 6 points was Jared Allen, who had 10. Like, the Cavs didn't get a great role player performance. They didn't have somebody chip in 15 points off the bench the way that we know a Sam Merrill or a Max Strus or a Jalen Tyson is capable of doing. They didn't get that type of performance. But because they've got so much star power, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but in this series, it might not matter. Now, in the future, they might need that type of effort. They might need more off the bench in a series against the Detroit Pistons, or dare I say, maybe the Orlando Magic in the second round. But in this series, the Raptors are a good team, but they're not a team that has enough talent to keep up with who the Cavs are, particularly on the offensive end of the floor. And I do think that the Cavs did a lot of really good things defensively. I thought they played a better defensive game than they did on Saturday afternoon. And that's not just because of the final score. And you look at it, and we talked about the Raptors 3-point shooting, and I believe they shot 48% from beyond the arc on Saturday's game. And they got some found money threes, if you will, where Scotty Barnes hit 3 of them on Saturday. Jamal Shed hit 5 of them on Saturday. Like, that duo on Saturday went 8 of 10. And I know the Cavs have struggled to defend the 3-point arc all year. But you look at what those two did after they went 8 of 10, because Scotty Barnes is a 30% 3-point shooter. And that is a very important thing that I want to discuss coming up in a minute, because I do think one of the things that we have realized here is the Cavs have a coaching advantage in this series as well. But Scotty Barnes, 30% 3-point shooter. Jamal Shed, 32% 3-point shooter. And the Cavs don't want to leave those guys uncovered, right? Like Kenny Atkinson was asked about this by a member of the Raptors media before the game. He's like, there are certain shots you're okay with, but you don't want to give those guys dare shots, right? Like if Jakob Poeltl, who I'm not sure is going to play anymore in this series, he didn't play at all in the second half for the Raptors. If he wants to take a three-pointer, the Cavs will say, okay, we dare you, take it. They're not doing that with Scotty Barnes. They want to contest, but they're not upset if Scotty Barnes is taking a three-pointer. Like that for the Cavs, if they get a contest on that shot, that as a defensive possession is a win. And I understand he went 3 for 4 on those looks on Saturday. The same thing can be said of Jamal Shed. Jamal Shed on Saturday went 5 of 6. Well, in game 2, those guys regressed to who they actually are. Scotty Barnes went 1 of 4 from beyond the arc. Jamal Shed went 1 of 5 from beyond the arc. Like the Cavs' defensive plan, I don't know that it changed all that much. I do think that they were a little bit more aggressive on that end of the floor, and that's part of the reason why they forced 22 turnovers in this game. But I think their defensive plan is a pretty sound one. And I ultimately think that the Cavs just have too much offense in this series for the Raptors to keep up. And Toronto attempted 26 threes, which I have talked so frequently about how it's not necessarily, and they only made 7 of them. The Cavs held them to 27% from beyond the arc. But I've talked about how controlling the attempts is an important thing. And sometimes teams are going to make shots because these are NBA players and they're awesome at shooting. And the Raptors are not awesome at shooting, and they also don't shoot a lot of them. And the Cavs did a great job of controlling the attempts. Now, the Raptors did find some success on the interior, but at that point when they did, the Cavs had such a sizable lead that I think the Cavs were willing to cede that a little bit instead of allowing or running the risk, I guess, of the Raptors getting hot from beyond the arc. Now, I do need to spend some time talking about the job that Dean Wade did defensively, because there was all that conversation about how Brandon Ingram needs to get more shots and how he needs to be a more aggressive cog in Toronto's offensive piece. Well, he got 15 shots, and I don't think it went the way that they thought it was going to go for Brandon Ingram. Dean Wade deserves a lot of that credit.
The NBA playoffs are here, where every possession matters, every matchup is magnified, and every game can swing a series. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a great way to get in on the action. You can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. The app makes it easy to follow the action with player stats, trends, and matchups all in one place. And during the playoffs, the extra insight really matters when you're looking at stars, role players, and key moments. It just makes the entire playoff experience more engaging from start to finish. As we round out the regular season, the Celtics play the Knicks in Madison Square Garden tonight. Line is at -5 on FanDuel. If you want to go the other way, Boston money line is 176, plus 176 on that line. Head over to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. Welcome back to the Big 6 in 60. Trent Williams is staying in San Francisco after agreeing to a new 2-year, $50 million deal. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker with Locked On 49ers have more.
It's a 2-year deal and an extension. And then in my head, it's like, well, he's locked up for 2 years. And they like McKivitz and they have him around. Maybe tackle just isn't in their future plans. And do I need to really adjust the way I drafted? Because I probably could have taken someone else, let's say Max Ahanator, which feels more like a guard that can play tackle as opposed to a guy that's just like, oh, this is really a tackle. And Blake Miller's really a tackle. So in my head, I'm like, maybe I should have taken somebody else. It could have been a guard or it could have been a completely different position, because I think the 49ers continue. I mean, first, tremendous offseason, I think, by the 49ers. I think they've done extremely well this year, building a competitive roster and moving strategically with everything they've done. But they continue to make it to where we can really take best player available. And I don't think there's any position that the 49ers could draft and the fan base be upset, because you could see a path to that guy being an answer long term.
Yeah, certainly more than last year. They've done that, which is making the mock drafts a little bit more difficult for me, and I'm sure it was for you as well, to try to really dial in what the 49ers were doing. I really do feel like I had a beat on what the 49ers were doing last year. and hit on a number of picks. But this year, I might go over because I don't feel nearly as confident about the direction the 49ers are going to go. I have an idea of what I think it's going to look like potentially, but we'll see. And I don't think that it changes that much with the Trent Williams signing. And I really want to see what exactly the deal ends up looking like. According to Trent Williams' agency, Croc, Trent Williams make NFL history with securing a new 2-year, $50 million contract with the 49ers. The contract includes $37 million fully guaranteed and a $22 million signing bonus, making Trent the first non-QB in NFL history to surpass $400 million in contracts and $225 million in guarantees. So we're talking about the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history here in Trent Williams. So first of all, congratulations to Trent Williams. Plenty of fuel for that PJ, right?
Yeah.
And so 2-year contract, Croc. So I want to see how this deal is structured, because my initial thought when I saw this was like, okay, kind of expected Trent Williams to be back. It's a 2-year contract. My question was about the second year of the contract. Clearly, that means Trent is going to be here this year for the 49ers. But you know what happens when we reach the final year of a Trent Williams contract, which is what we went through this offseason. And guess what? That's next offseason again. So what is the plan? Is there a succession plan that the 49ers want to start here? Is next year's part of the deal actually really part of the deal that they plan on playing out? And how does that contract structure look? And what does next year's numbers look like? And is Trent Williams going to say, well, that's not going to work for me once we get to next year, which is probably what is going to happen. And then we're doing the dance once again. But John Lynch did speak on those things at his press conference. And the words that John Lynch used was, I have great confidence that Trent Williams will be here for the 2 years of that contract. But we still have to prepare for the future, was kind of the short answer of what John Lynch gave about that. So what do you think? Is if truly Trent Williams is going to be the starting left tackle for the next 2 years, you definitely don't need to start finding his replacement necessarily right now, because that would mean you could start finding that replacement offensive tackle next year, and he would still have that first year that he could play and wait maybe behind Trent Williams. So it is definitely something to think about. I'm not sure if I buy that, though, Croc, right now, that Trent Williams is going to be the starting left tackle for the 49ers in 2027. At his age, there's a lot that can happen between now and then, is all I'm saying.
I gotta find the text message I sent to you. Let me pull that up real quick. But I said right here at 8:49 a.m. with only 37 million of the money fully guaranteed and 22 million signing bonus. Is this kind of a 1-year deal? You know,
that's my question. Yeah, and we know how agents love to fluff those numbers too. So when we see what the real numbers are, does it even look like 37 million guaranteed, or is it completely different looking structure wise? And 22 of that is in signing bonus. So that means next year there's going to be a lot of not guaranteed money, which could seemingly be easy to get out of. Or, you know, maybe so do you want to go? I'm going to go galaxy brain, sort of conspiracy theory, lying season, playing the NFL draft game with this, Croc. We need to are you ready for this right now?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're the 49ers and you're playing the draft game, and right now everybody has offensive tackle in their mock drafts, and all the Todd McShay in his last mock draft said Caleb Lomu, his floor, he will not get past the 49ers at 27. Like, matter of factly, he's saying this, right? I don't know where they're getting their information. We know insiders are very wrong. They have been very wrong before about the 49ers, right? A lot of teams are trying to lie because it is lying season and throw people off their scent too. And there's a reason that insiders still only get like 5 picks right over the course of the entire first round, you know, getting team to player, because you think you know, but you really don't know. And insiders get their information from other teams. They don't get it from the actual team they're reporting on. They get it from what the teams think that the other teams are going to do, you know, so it becomes a weird game of telephone from insiders. But if you're the 49ers and you wanted to potentially draft the heir apparent at offensive tackle and you really had a good feeling about, maybe you like Proctor, Lomu, and Max Ahanator, you're like, with the best guy that's there of those three, one of them's going to be there. We're going to draft him. Like we're going to do this. And he's going to play guard for a year and compete there. And he's going to be our next left tackle, right? Maybe that's the plan for the 49ers. But they don't want teams to, especially the team right behind them. Texans need an offensive lineman. They don't want the Texans to jump in front of the 49ers and trade up and get their guy, right? And so if you know, what's the advantage of announcing the signing and signing Trent Williams 2 days before the draft, 3 days before the draft?
You throw people off, you throw people off a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, they're not going the offensive line. Now, well, same thing I thought. Okay, I think that ends the line talks. But does it?
Right. So the thing you don't want is everybody to go like, oh, so it is wide receiver, and then jump in front of you for the thing that you do want to take. So I think there's an opportunity for the 49ers here that if they really wanted wide receiver, they would want to keep people projecting offensive tackle to them at 27. And if they want an offensive tackle, this is a way to get people to start mocking other positions and projecting that the 49ers are not going to go offensive tackle. Do you buy that the 49ers could be playing the draft game that hard that they could have waited to announce it, but they didn't? The timing is very interesting on this one. And it could be nothing. It could be that they just wanted to have things guaranteed. And once it was done, and they wanted to have some something solid before the draft came. But I feel like the 49ers played the draft game enough that it had to be something that they talked about and thought about at least.
Yeah, no, that's a curious one. He was asked about a little bit on the presser about the timing of it and does it change any of your plans heading into the draft? I wish he kind of would have waited, because I think then at least just playing the game, it leaves everything open for people to not know exactly what you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I would rather go into it knowing, well, we got our guy, right? Kind of like with the whole Joe Staley, him retiring. Well, we didn't know Joe Staley was retiring, and then all of a sudden they trade for, they end up trading for Trent Williams. I mean, same thing back with the McGlinchey pick, and there was one person, was it Peter Schrager, who had the 49ers taking Mike McGlinchey at pick 9.
I think it was Daniel Jeremiah, maybe.
Or like Mike McGlinchey, there's no way. Like the 49ers have Joe Staley and Trent Brown. Like, why would they do that? Then all of a sudden they drafted him when it didn't make a whole lot of sense. I like the 49ers kind of keeping things close to the vest until it happens, and then they make their move after. So pick 27, hoping you get the guy that you wanted, and then, hey, as soon as that pick comes in, we can announce right then and there, oh, by the way, we re-signed our guy Trent Williams.
Welcome back to the Big 6 in 60. Kentucky missed out on Donnie Freeman after the former Syracuse forward committed to St. John's. Lance Daw with Locked On Kentucky has his thoughts on why the Wildcats lost that battle.
Donnie Freeman commits to St. John's. For those of you that are not privy to how this unfolded, for those of you that don't know what happened, really quickly here, Donnie Freeman takes a visit to Kentucky last week. According to reports everywhere, Kentucky was in a really good spot coming out of that visit, and UConn, Alabama bowed out of the race, according to reporting. You had Tennessee take a look. You had St. John's take a look. But everybody and their mother said the 6'9" power forward out of Syracuse is probably going to be a Kentucky Wildcat. We're just waiting for it to pop. And a commitment, according to KSR, Jack Pilgrim and Jacob Polachek, felt imminent on Sunday. Kentucky apparently gave Freeman an offer. St. John's decided no, they want to pay Freeman more, most likely thanks to Freeman's agent working out some negotiations with the Red Storm. Apparently, talks got up north of $3 million. I think reporting earlier today was somewhere between 3 to 3.2 million. And Kentucky, as of this afternoon, was basically sitting in a spot where they could make a decision to cough up the money, because also, according to reporting, Donnie Freeman wanted to be at Kentucky. Kentucky decides, I guess, not to cough up the money. And here we are now at nearly 10 o'clock on Monday night. Donnie Freeman commits to St. John's. And I'm not going to lie to you guys. Initially, I tweeted out that if Kentucky does not get Freeman, if this falls through, I didn't think it was going to be Pope's fault, because based on what I could tell, just based on the reporting that I had read and the things that I had heard, it was more so Freeman's agent kind of pulling off some bull here at the last minute. And my expectation was for Kentucky to cough up whatever extra amount of money it was going to take to get what is effectively their only prospect in the portal right now that could be a starter next season. You let Sebastian Roncic go to Florida State with the expectation that you're going to get Freeman, and then you decide not to pay up. I still don't know if I can shovel 100% of the blame on Mark Pope here, because apparently this was just weird. Behind the scenes, people are saying this is weird, the way that this is going down. But the fact that you didn't close and you have the money and you need the player, we can have the debate as to whether or not Donnie Freeman is actually the quality of player Kentucky needs to win a national championship. You don't have a better choice right now. He was it. He was it. Roncic goes to FSU. Freeman is your only option. And you let it happen. You let your mentor, your former coach, the guy who led you, the guy who allowed you to be captain at Kentucky, you let him take the one player in the portal that you need the most right now. You let him come in, offer a little bit more money or a substantial amount, we'll call it somewhere between $1 million to $200,000. Based on the money that Kentucky spent last year, proudly spent, doesn't seem like that would have been too much to cough up, considering, again, I want to reiterate this, he was your only option. He's the only guy you are looking at in the portal that could play the four effectively enough to where he could be a starter. You aren't looking at anybody else. Justin McBride is taking a visit later this week. I like some of McBride's game. I don't think he's a starting power forward in this league. We'll see, but I don't think he's better than Donnie Freeman. He's not more versatile. He doesn't have higher upside. And you have to ask the question, what is going on with Mark Pope? What sort of process goes into the decision making here? What are you doing? You continue to back off prospects that you desperately need. You continue to go into the weeds in the transfer portal to find players that aren't exactly the best fit. As much as I like Alex Wilkins, as much as I like Zoom Diallo, based on what we've seen, if we're just going to play this out, I mean, those are two players that don't exactly fit what you want to do or what traditionally you have done. You're going to have to change a lot about your offense in order for those two to not just work independent of each other, but to work together, which seems like what we're trending towards considering you brought them on within a week of each other. This makes zero sense. This makes zero sense for Mark Pope to just let this happen, or maybe not even necessarily let it happen, finding ways to just not close. I think that this is panic time. We are officially hitting the panic button for Mark Pope at the University of Kentucky, because if you don't get Tyron Stokes, you don't have a roster, right? At least we're projecting out. You aren't going to have a roster that's going to even sniff the top half of the SEC. You don't have it. You don't have the answers. Now we'll see what happens with Hawthorne. We'll talk about him later in the show. We'll see what happens with Braden. But as of this moment, you are screwed. You are in a world of hurt if you are Kentucky. Big Blue Dylan on Twitter tweeted this out. Right before I went live, I caught it. I want to give him a shout out. He's just doing really, really good work online right now. but he made a really good point. I want to read it verbatim. Kentucky isn't strategically prioritizing either scenario. Incoming, Zoom Diallo, Alex Wilkins, Mason Williams. Returning, Cam Williams, Braden Hawthorne, Trent Noah, Malachi Marino, Reese Potter. Just 5 confirmed targets left on the transfer portal big board at this time. It'd be Jerome Morton out of Washington State, which, by the way, haven't gotten a chance to talk about it on the show because it popped earlier this afternoon. Guard out of Washington State from Lexington originally is going to be taking a visit later this week. He would be a backup option at shooting guard. Isaac Seliskar, who we've heard nothing about. Justin McBride out of James Madison. Devin Williams out of FAU. And Gabe Dines out of USC. It is just not close to good enough. And Dylan finished with this. Kentucky officially contacted just 4 of the top 22 transfers. What is the game plan? They seem to have zero direction, zero plan. They are letting all of this play out in front of their eyes, and we have no answers for who they're going to get. And you may say, well, we're just hoping on Tyron Stokes. We're just seeing if he commits to us. You realize he's been a Kansas lean since November, right? You realize that you've not been leading this since you screwed it up in late October. If I was a betting man, I would say Stokes goes to Kansas. I would say that a couple of Kentucky's other major prospects at the 4 go elsewhere. And Kentucky ends up in a really, 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 really bad spot where they have to take a hard look in the mirror and say, what on earth are we going to do at the 3 and the 4? Because they don't have answers. There are no answers in the portal. At least, let's back this up for a second. There are no answers that you could look at on paper and you could say with confidence, these guys are going to help Kentucky in contention for in their pursuit of a national championship. You can look at somebody like Seliskar from Yale. You could look at somebody like Dines from USC, somebody like Williams from Florida Atlantic, right? Those players aren't helping you win a national title. They're good on their own, but they aren't national title roster caliber. Not on paper, surely not on paper. You have more resources, you have more money, you have a better name brand than just about any program in college athletics, save for Duke, Kansas, a couple of others. But you're right there, if not above them. And you continue to embarrass yourself. Wet the bed when the moment matters. You are getting right up to the 1 yard line and you're finding a way to turn the ball over. I do not get it. I do not understand. And right now, you're in a scramble. Congratulations. You are in a flop panic. If you are looking at players and saying, we need guys who will help us win in the SEC. Because right now, you're looking at a few players at most, and none of them are worthy of playing at Kentucky, frankly. In my opinion, sure, I'd like them as backups. None of them are starter caliber. If you expect to win a national championship or compete for one at the very least, just be good. Be a top 20 team on KenPom. This ain't it. This ain't it. It is a flop panic right now for Kentucky basketball.
That's all for today's Big 6 in 60. If you follow basketball, football, or college sports, the Big 3 in 30 has a half hour on the biggest news in the NFL, the NBA, and on campus, going up every weekday just like this one. Just search the Big 3 in 30 NBA, the Big 3 in 30 NFL, or the Big 3 in 30 college, wherever you're listening or watching now. Thanks again for tuning in to the Big 6 in 60.